right. It is 5 p.m. I would like to call the meeting to order. Ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Waldron,
Here.
Commissioner Tippett,
Here.
Commissioner Westman,
Present.
Commissioner Sauer,
I heard you just pulled in. Somebody just hollered.
Mayor May.
Here, we do have a quorum present, and I've been told that Commissioner Sauer is making his way up to the meeting. First item would be a TIF presentation regarding parcels B and C development from Mr. James Parsons. Jim, good to have you with us tonight. Jim?
Frozen.
I know Jim's, he's out of town, so I assume he just picked out and come back in.
Okay. Let's,
Can we go with the consent agenda, Mayor?
so let's go on and start working on the consent agenda, and when he comes back, we will pick up on that. So first item, City Manager, if you will read the consent calendar, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 1 is approval of the minutes from May 18th, 2020 special regular meeting. Item 2 is FY21 roadway restoration bid award. Request approval of the unit price contract with Randall Davies Construction to perform up to $600,000 of asphalt work to repair utility cuts in city streets. Utility companies will reimburse the city 115% of all expenses associated with this contract in relation to their pavement disturbance. Item 3 is FY21 street resurfacing contract. Request approval of the unit price contract with Flynn Brothers Contracting to perform normal scheduled street resurfacing in the city limits for the next year. This contract will not exceed $650,000. Item 4 is professional services contract for design of the East Frankfort Interceptor. Request approval of an engineering design agreement with Hazen and Sawyer in the amount of $2,078,925 for the proposed East Frankfort Interceptor and storage facility. Item 5 is professional services contract for design of the Prevention Park pump station. Request approval of an engineering design agreement with GRW Engineers in the amount of $609,096 for the proposed Prevention Park pump station. Item 6 is professional services contract for design of the Miami Trail pump station. Request approval of an engineering design agreement with Hazen and Sawyer in the amount of $148,632 for the proposed Miami Trail sewer improvements. Item 7 is odor control contract. Request approval of a contract not to exceed $280,000 with Source Technologies to perform odor control for the sewer department. Item 8 is amendment to the professional services contract for the design of the Fort Boone pump station project. Request approval to amend the existing contract with Palmer Engineering to complete the design for the Fort Boone pump station due to an unexpected increase in flows. The cost of the amendment at $74,827.50. Item 9 is a professional services contract for small projects at the wastewater treatment plant and the collection system. Request approval of an engineering design agreement with HMB up to $20,000 for engineering assistance on small design projects throughout the year. Item 10 is a professional services contract for work in obtaining easements for sewer projects. Request approval of an engineering design agreement with HMB for up to $20,000 for engineering assistance on easement acquisition throughout the year. Item 11 is a professional services contract for design of biosolids processing. Request approval of an engineering design agreement with Bell Engineering in the amount of $317,000 to design a conversion from Class B biosolid to a Class A biosolid. Item 12 is a medical director contract. Request approval of a $500 monthly contract extension with Dr. Walter Lubbers to serve as the medical director for fire, EMS, and E911 activities as outlined in the interlocal agreement between the city and the county. Item 13 is the associate medical director contract. Request approval of a $75 per hour contract with Dr. Tyler Corey to serve as the Associate Medical Director for the Frankfort Fire and Emergency Medical Services Teaching Education Institute. Item 14 is an MOU for assessment of persons needing mental health evaluations. Request approval of a memorandum of understanding between New Vista of the Bluegrass to provide mental health assessments for the police department. Item 15 is personnel actions. First is the appointment of Kelly Wilson, Public Works, Solid Waste, effective June 23rd, 2020, Public Works Tech 1. Appointment of Jerry Wise, Police Department, effective June 30th, 2020, Patrol Officer 3. Appointment of Kendrick Harvey, Sewer Department, effective June 23rd, 2020, Plant Operator 1. Promotion of Judd Ellis, IT, effective June 23rd, 2020, Computer Tech 2 to IT Deputy Director. Resignation of Andrew Dernberg, Fire Department, effective June 11th, 2020, Firefighter 2. Resignation of John Downs, Parks and Rec, effective July 6th, 2020. Museum Curator, authorized payout of accrued leave. Retirement of Lewis Adams, Public Works Transit, effective June 19th, 2020. Transit driver, authorized payout of accrued leave. Attachments are so disposed. And also permission to make up to 6 conditional offers of employment and 2 alternate conditional offers of employment for the position of firefighter EMT recruit. The request to make these conditional offers of employment is contingent upon successful completion of background medical, psychological, polygraph, and drug screen examinations by each candidate.
Right, we've heard. Yes, go ahead. Make a motion.
I know I'm a little bit late to the table this morning, or this afternoon. I would like, if it's permissible, Mayor, to defer on the Fort Boone pump station and place it at the end of the action items, please.
What number is it? Is it the 7?
Keith, I don't have that number.
It is.
Number 8.
Number 8.
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 8.
Okay.
If there's no objection, we'll remove number 8 from the consent calendar. Item and that would be in order would be a motion on the consent items with number 8 removed.
And placed at the end of the action items, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Waiting on a motion. Anyone want to make a motion to move the passage of the consent calendar?
Move to approve, Mayor.
Moved by Commissioner Tippett,
Second.
second by Commissioner Waldridge. All those who designated their presence and will be considered to voted in the affirmative on consent items. And we will place number 8 as action item number 6.
Mayor, I have sent the clerk a vote modification request for myself that I'll take care of after this meeting.
All right. We do have Mr. Parsons back with us. Oh, we did. Jim, are you with us, Mr. Parsons? Oh, he left. All right. Does anybody have any contact with Mr. Parsons by telephone?
Yes, I'll reach out to him.
Okay. Then we will go on and then do first and second. Well, I think they're all second readings tonight. First item under action items would be second reading on the item under item number 1. So if I could have that read by title and summary only, please, by the solicitor.
An ordinance amending the City of Frankfort Code of Ordinances, Section 130.02, relating to public property. This ordinance amends Section 130.02 of the City of Frankfort Code of Ordinances to allow for recovery of costs associated with repair or replacement of public roadways, features, and appurtenances from a person who deliberately, wantonly, or recklessly destroys such public property.
All right, thank you. I'm not sure who removed that.
Wisman, move to approve.
Oh, Commissioner Wisman, motion. Second by Commissioner Waldron. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Yes. I see your list, but I didn't hear you, but yes. Tippit?
Commissioner Waldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Waldridge,
Yes.
Mr. Tippett,
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Wiseman,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauer,
Yes.
I vote yes. Item
Mayor
number 1 is adopted. Now I think we have Ms. Parsons with us. Jim, welcome.
How are you? Sorry, I lost connection there for a
That's
minute
okay.
here.
I understand. It's this is be trying sometime with this many people, but good to have you with us. If you would like to go ahead and make your presentation, we would appreciate hearing from you, sir.
Okay, be glad to do so. For those who don't know me, I'm an attorney with Keating, Muthen, and Kleekamp, but in practice almost exclusively in the area of incentives for development, including tax increment financing. Just for your information, prior to my law career, though, I was a recovering city and county official. I was the city manager in Newport for a number of years and city solicitor. And then my last stint in government, I was the county administrator and deputy county judge in Boone County. So I certainly understand all the work you do and really appreciate that and things. So I just wanted to, I guess, go over, I don't know exactly what specific you want to hear relative to TIF. I can talk about TIF in general, but I can also then talk about the specific process we're going through relative to the downtown Frankfort development area. So, which is similar to what I presented to the fiscal court a few weeks ago or so, when I talked about the specific steps for creating a TIF district.
I would think, if you don't mind, we can keep it really short here because our folks, I think they all know. If somebody doesn't, then we can certainly do so. I actually was going to play a video from HUD that HUD has. It's about a 2-minute, some second video on TIFs, if anybody thinks that would be useful. But I think if you can just, we can skip that. I think most of our.
Okay, I could do that. So now if you hear my granddaughters in the background, they might break in once in a while. It's kind of hard to control them while I'm down here on vacation. But in any event, we're in the process of reviewing and putting together the TIF documents for the downtown Frankfort development area. And you may have received a copy of the development plan, but the specific steps to do that is to first prepare a development plan, which is really not a zoning plan. It's not the same thing as you would normally think of in terms, because it's not a zoning document at all. It's simply it's a concept of that kind of identifies the area you plan to create the TIF district for, and then basically discusses the reasons why the area qualifies as a TIF. It kind of, so you give some description of the area, and then really what is your plan for redevelopment of the area. So it's really a very general document. It's something, quite frankly, you don't even look at after you implement the TIF district, but it's a statutory requirement. So the first process of creating a TIF district, the type of TIF district we're talking about, is to have a development plan, and that's been pretty much drafted. And if you've reviewed a copy of that document, it's pretty benign. It doesn't commit the city or county to do anything specific. In fact, there's references in the document as to what you may pledge, but there's nothing in there that would indicate what you plan to pledge, if anything, for the specific project at this point. Those terms would actually be part of some other documents as this moves forward. So the first step would actually have a public hearing on the development plan itself, and that would be done by the city. It's my understanding the county may participate at the hearing, but it's really a city development plan that has to be advertised and given notice. It's just a general notice, like a traditional public hearing you would normally have relative to that. The next steps, though, after you do the development plan, which is a legally required document, is to put together the actual pledge documents. And the pledge document you would have is a local participation agreement. And that local participation agreement besides the ordinance, quite frankly, is the most important document in this whole process, because that document is actually the official tax pledge from the city of Frankfort and any other taxing district that agrees to participate in a pledge of their revenues to the TIF. That local participation agreement will include the taxes that are subject to being pledged. It will identify the project and how you're going to use the pledge of tax revenues. And it will also set the term of the pledge, when the maximum term can be 30 years if you choose to do so. I think we're looking at the potential of matching a state program. So we're looking at a 20-year pledge of tax revenues in this one, although that ultimately would be decided as we move forward. But the maximum you could pledge tax revenues is 30 years. You may pledge up to 100% of the increment, and the increment is the amount of city tax revenues from real property taxes and occupational taxes over the base, which the base is the current. For instance, if we create this TIF district in 2020, the base year normally would be 2019. So we would look at what city taxes were being generated during calendar year 2019, and that's the base. And you don't pledge any of those revenues, so that you don't pledge any of the existing tax revenues. It's only the increase over that amount that's subject to being pledged in the document. In addition to that, you may legally pledge 100% of that increment over the term of the 20 years or 30 years, in this case 20. But that amount has not been determined yet as to what you would be actually pledging as far as revenues go. In addition to that, there's a potential for other taxing districts to participate. I know there's been some direct discussions with the county as to whether the county would participate also. But the other special taxing districts, if they choose to do so, may also pledge tax revenues, except the school taxes cannot be pledged. So the school district cannot pledge tax revenues. And I don't believe you have a fire district, but if you had a fire district, fire districts may not pledge tax revenues to a TIF. So the special districts like library, extension, health, those are the types of districts that could pledge their tax revenues. In addition to that, if they choose to pledge their tax revenues, they would have to all vote affirmatively. So for instance, the city created a TIF district, you don't automatically then commit another district. If they choose to participate, they would have to vote to be a party to the tax incentive agreement and relative to that. So just be aware of that particular situation. After the local participation agreement is actually adopted by ordinance, and so when the city would adopt the ordinance, because you would be the entity creating the TIF district, you would effectively be one creating the TIF district, the map and the TIF district itself. You'd be authorizing your pledge to the local participation agreement. You would be approving the development plan, and you'd also be designating the agency which would be the entity responsible for administering and overseeing and coordinating the development area ordinance. In that case, it could be a city department, or if you're working in partnership with the county, you may work out a specific entity to act as the agency. But most of the time, it works out a lot better just to have a city department as the agency in that circumstance and in that deal. Because working with a specific development project, in this case, and a specific developer, another document that is probably as important as the local participation agreement would be the development agreement. So when I said earlier, there is not a specific recommendation at this point as to what taxes are to be pledged and the amounts at this point. But that would be basically set forth in a development agreement with the developer, which will then set forth the obligations of the developer, and then the city and county would probably be a party to that agreement also, as well as the agency. And that would really set the stage for how much of the TIF pledge you're going to commit to the particular developer in this case, or to pay certain public costs associated with the project. So that development agreement is pretty critical, and that's another document that would be approved as part of the ordinance. So the critical steps, I think, at this point would be to, one, finalize the development plan, and it's pretty final. It's at this point, we would file that document with the city clerk and the fiscal court clerk. The city then would schedule a time for a public hearing on the development plan. And then subsequent to that, we would be working with the developer to put together the development agreement with the developer as to what the city, county, and other taxing districts may be willing to pledge to support this particular project. And when that document's pretty much finalized, we would put together the local participation agreement and the ordinance, and then putting those things ready for city adoption when you're ready to move forward in that. In addition to that, so that's kind of the steps. Concurrently with that is, once the city was ready to move forward and the development agreement was in place, the county would need to adopt an ordinance agreeing to participate approve the development agreement, and also approve its pledge to the local participation agreement. And then any taxing districts, library or whatever that agreed to participate in a pledge of revenues, they would act just by motion or resolution, whatever their normal practice would be, to be parties to the agreement if those entities are going to be involved with the pledge. Just for informational purposes, the pledges from the city and county and special taxing districts don't have to be the same. They can be different. And it's not that unusual for special taxing districts, if they agree to pledge taxes, to possibly agree to a lesser percentage than the city or county. And the only reason for that is those special taxing districts are often not as involved with economic development and things. And so it's oftentimes, they don't look at economic development the same way as a city or county does. And so they may choose to participate, but oftentimes they may agree to pledge for a less percentage possibly. That doesn't have to be the case. I'm just making you aware of the fact that the local participation agreement does not have to be exact for each taxing district that agrees to pledge. This particular concept and what we're working under also is, once the TIF district is created and the local participation agreement is approved, then we anticipate applying to the state and asking the state to participate through one of its participation programs. And the most likely, I think, for this particular project is the mixed use program that allows a recovery of state real property taxes, sales taxes, and income tax that the project generates. But that's a matter we would have to negotiate with the Economic Development Cabinet. But we can have some preliminary discussions with the cabinet at this point. But until everything's ready, the TIF district has been created at the local level, we can't officially submit the application. That application would be submitted by the agency. That would be whoever the city designates. For instance, if you designate a department, it's the agency that applies for the funds. And also just be aware of the fact, any state TIF increment will not flow directly to a developer. It flows back to the agency, and then the agency would then use the monies in accordance with the terms of the development agreement and things. So the developer really is not really a party through the state application process. The developer's critical, and we use a lot of information from the developer to determine what the state increment is going to be, but the party between the state and the state and the local jurisdiction is the agency that the city designates. And so that's part of the process here. In fact, what I would anticipate, and it's very uncommon, we haven't negotiated all the terms of the development agreement yet, but it's very common to have conditions in the development agreement that, for instance, your participation may be this amount, but it's conditioned upon some type of participation or from the states. And for instance, we've done a number of these in Lexington. And if you look at the local participation agreement and the development agreement that Lexington often uses, they actually agree to a pledge of tax revenues, but they make it conditioned, and they don't even release local tax revenues until the minimum capital, the states approved it at their end, and also the states approve the minimum capital investment for the program, so that they kind of tie local approval with the fact that the state will partner and be part of the agreement. It doesn't have to be that way, but it's very common that because a lot of this, you're leveraging your tax revenues to try to get other tax revenues from the state to make this work. And so those type of conditions are very, very common in these development agreements. At the present time, we've asked for some more detailed information on cost and kind of a justification for the need for the local incentive at all to this project. And we're really working with the developer to put those numbers together so we can determine whether or not what the developer is saying that needs to make this project work is fair and reasonable to the local jurisdictions involved. So that's kind of where we are at this particular point. It's kind of an overview. The first step's really been done. We've drafted the development agreement. Development plan. That's in pretty much final form. We can still make some minor edits or tweaks, but I think it's okay for moving forward to the public hearing. And then the next steps after that would be to finalize the development agreement, and then also work through the local participation agreement, which is the tax pledge agreement. That's kind of a pretty quick overview, but I'll be glad to answer questions if there are any.
Commissioner Tippett has his hand up. Commissioner Tippett.
Thank you. And I've got a couple of questions, and maybe the city manager probably want to chime in. There seems to be some confusion in the public as to, we keep saying parcel B and C, and originally, we were talking about parcel B, and then parcel C came along with its, I guess, ground leases and things like that, right? But we're talking about one project here, not two. So any tax monies that we dedicate to this TIF go to one single solitary project, and all the costs for the developer will be in one package, not two. Is that correct, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, that's correct. Parcel B and C total 11 acres. If you'll see, the TIF district is like 18 acres, but it's just out to the right of way. So it catches the streets around it. So It is all one big project. Parcel B, right there with the hotel. Parcel C is the YMCA and the garage that's still present. That's all one big project.
Right. And, some incentive package is required for this project to get off the ground. That's just a statement of fact.
I would agree 100% that no matter how we got here, I truly believe a developer to come into Frankfort to put this money into a urban mixed-use development that's been proposed, they can't get the lending to build the parking garage and then do all this development. The numbers don't work out. But
and go ahead, Keith.
We are in the middle of it, as Jim mentioned. This TIF development plan is a statutory requirement. A lot of the wording in there, if you were to read the statute, it says, does it meet this criteria? This development plan shows that it does. Now, the guts of the SOB and the development agreement with the developer, and I'm glad he mentioned the contingency parts. We can say we'll participate X if the state participates X. Right. Or we'll participate X if we get our transit grant. There's a lot of different options there. The developer initially asked for 11 million, 6 million. That was for the parking garage. We have since applied for a transit grant that, if funded fully, would pay for the entire garage. So our participation in a perfect world, we'd get this transit grant, the state would participate with the TIF, and our participation would be a low amount, 20, 30%. But
Right.
but there's a lot to figure that out.
Right. And this will be my last editorial comment question, quasi question. It's going to require a substantial amount of tax dollars to make this thing work. Whether we lower we can lower our tax money exposure to the project. If the state and federal government decide to give us grant monies, that's tax money too. It's just coming from Paducah or Iowa. Okay. That's correct, right? Tax money, I think folks should understand that tax monies are required to make this project go, but we as a commission, I feel like I can speak for my colleagues here, we are going to do the very best we can to lower our local exposure to that tax liability. Thank you.
Commissioner, in follow up to that, just as a practical matter, almost all of these projects in the downtown areas that need structured parking, they will not happen without some type of incentive. It doesn't matter who, or some other way to pay for it, because the structured parking, I do a lot of private development too here. So I can tell you, we haven't seen all the developers' numbers yet, but it's not surprising to me at all that the developer is going to need some type of assistance on the structured parking.
Any other questions? Commissioner Sauer.
A few from Mr. Parsons. Mr. Parsons, how many TIFs have you been involved with?
Probably 15 or 20 or so. I do all of Lexington's work. So I've done every one of those or worked through them with those projects. I'm working on a project in Owensboro now. I've done a lot of about all the every one that's been done in Northern Kentucky. I've done those. I've done some small local only TIFs, like for the Arc Encounter project and things, because you can do these TIF districts and not have any state participation, and so there's a process for doing that. And so I've done a number of those across the state. I've done I don't know if you're a UK fan or a U of L fan, but I did the TIF work for the University of Louisville and its foundation for the 2 of the 3 TIF districts they've done for their area and things. So I've done a lot of this across. I did the original Bowling Green TIF, that the WKU Gateway project that's up and been implemented in downtown Bowling Green.
Well, against you, but and we understand that it's an area of about 18 acres. Is that right, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, sir. If you include Wilkinson Boulevard and the 2 roads, yes.
Okay, Mr. Parsons, I'd like you to speak to the experience that you've had regarding the perimeter of this particular TIF. How likely are we to see increased property tax revenue on the periphery?
I don't think that's necessarily a TIF question per se. I think any major development in the downtown is going to have a benefit to the adjacent areas. So if you have a big investment in a downtown area, you're going to find ultimately that other things are going to start happening around it. And I think that's just normal. It's kind of like, if you have you'll have one project that's catalytic, and then you'll start seeing some other smaller development or other things start happening to service that particular project, or because there's more activity in downtown. I think that just naturally is going to create more opportunities for development.
Our job growth as well. Some of those opportunities, I would think, would be sales tax revenue increases. Another issue for me also, and for this city, is occupational tax revenue on the periphery. And I think that's something that's often not thought of, not valued when you're considering a TIF. is those periphery jobs, revenue, increase in taxes.
Yeah, the one area that I think often gets overlooked, because when we're looking at just your budget, you quite frankly focus on jobs and payroll taxes, right? And that's what that brings your budget. I think people often overlook the impact of residential because bringing that residential downtown is one of the big things that helps fuel the restaurants at night. It's not the jobs that fuel that. It's having residential and the spending power downtown. I really think it gets overlooked. It gets overlooked by the state a lot because they don't count that as economic development per se. But I can tell you that any new residential downtown is going to have a real benefit to your smaller businesses, from restaurants to bars to other service businesses downtown, because that's what helps drive that type of business, having people downtown on a regular basis and living there.
Parsons, the benefit to the Frankfort Independent School System. Can you speak to that issue?
Yeah, they'll actually get 100, whatever the taxes on, since they cannot participate through the TIF. Any increase in value in this area that would be on the tax rolls would go directly to them. TIF now doesn't act as a tax exemption, so it actually increases assessment. Taxes are paid just like they normally would be. And so in this case, if this project was built, assessments are increased. And so the direct beneficiary, all of that would go to the benefit of the school system. So again, it doesn't exempt any taxes at all. It simply says that after the taxes are collected, you're agreeing to use or set aside a portion of those to support the project after the fact.
Mayor.
Listman?
Mr. Parsons, you bring up several great points that, given that the current tax value of the properties generally are zero, we have nothing but a way to go up. Of course, I'm very excited about the potential to add residential more than any other factor in this project. I believe that the missing component of our downtown for a very long time, since demolition of this facility and rebuilding in the 60s, was the removal of our residential population that feed our businesses. Of course, the counterfactor and part of a great concern is to make sure that we don't have a new development that is the shiny, bright structure that everyone wants to move into, that they negate or forget about our existing downtown, where we want to increase those occupational taxes, those job opportunities, and the investment in those. So we have a very fine balance, I think, to play here, that we don't incentivize one project at the detriment of another. But as yet, to my knowledge, this body as a whole has not seen the full development plan. There were some schematics and some conceptual things. So I'm not in any. I believe we were going to be asked to move forward tonight with a public hearing, but I don't believe we're at that point yet until this body is able to see the development plan. Although I think we need to hurry. This has been on. Been derailed by COVID-19 for some time, and I would hope that we get to move forward our next meeting. But until we get to see exactly the impacts of the entire project within the defined boundary, we have intentionally added our public infrastructure that's already existing all around the project, including Broadway, Wilkinson, St. Clair, Miro, and Clinton Streets. The impact on those facilities and the existing neighborhoods that I reside in myself are all important components to review in what the complete ask of the developer is, the finalized ask. We've not yet been given, to my knowledge, a firm number. We've been given a ballpark. Mr. Parker, you might have more information that you've not passed along to the commission yet. But I do want to make sure we have time and thorough time to review all of that in depth before we make a decision or before we're asked to do so. I know there's been a lot of conversations with the city manager and some others that the commission hasn't been privy to come up with a final determination on this, but we'll promise to the community we'll thoroughly review the impact of this and make sure that those concerns that are being expressed to me that we might pledge too much local taxing authority to this project at the detriment of our existing downtown and existing merchants and some of our residential projects, that we will make sure we're thorough in reviewing those instances.
Any other, city manager?
The statutory required TIF development plan is in your packet for tonight. So that is in essentially a complete format. It's a draft. So if you want to look at that, I think you all got that Friday. The TIF agreement is not been drafted yet. I am not privy to it and haven't seen it. I think Jim has probably worked on it a little bit, just changing names and stuff, but it's the purview of the commission to determine the guts of that. But you do have a copy of the TIF development plan in your packet from Friday.
Mayor.
Commissioner Tippett.
One more quick question for Mr. Parsons and maybe the city manager as well. What typically is the percentage of tax revenue that's, I won't say given, but allocated to the TIF? Is a standard percentage?
There is no standard percentage. We used to, from a legal standpoint, the state could, under the mixed use program, which is one of the programs we often apply under because it gives you the benefit of sales and income taxes. So traditionally, we would at least match whatever the state would have, we anticipated the state would do. They could give 80% under that program. Now, right now, they've been not approving, even though they legally may give 80%, they've been giving less than that over the life of the TIF. So we would probably, so that there's no standards was what I'm trying to say. It used to be more of a standard when we knew what the state was going to do but they've been changing their rules a little bit there. So we would at least want to give as much as the percentage of the state would give. Another way of doing it might be to look at what the project needs are and then kind of match it to whatever the project needs are so that you have a combination of state and local monies might meet that capped amount or something. That's the way that Lexington's been doing it lately. Instead of, they give a certain amount and then they cap the total award, but that includes local and state monies that would come in, and it's not more than what the project needs. So I will say that I put together a framework for a local participation agreement only at this point. We don't have the information we need from the developer yet as to justify the true costs of what they need for the project at this point. And that's the next step. After you have the public hearing, that's just to get that part of the process out of the way, because it's just a legal requirement. If you wanted to have the public hearing on the development plan, the meats of this, quite frankly, are going to be that development agreement and then the local participation agreement, and that's got to be negotiated with the developer.
Amen. Jim, you said something about the next process, of course, is the local hearing. That is a very important component here, and not something I'm willing to rush, and not something that we just need to get out of the way. There is an opportunity for a full transformation for our community. And as yet, the community has not got a lot of information about this project, and there's a lot of concern and fear that I don't think is warranted, but is certainly something that we need to be very transparent in working with our citizens to make sure they understand this project fully. And as far as I'm concerned, I forgot to mention that this is not viable whatsoever and is completely contingent on the state's participation. The state took this action, and without consulting with the commission or members of the community, that dropped this project in our lap. In some ways, thankfully so, but they must participate in some manner to hopefully the greatest level or extent possible in this project in helping us. And I think this administration will probably be more favorable than the last in doing so. But I'm not willing to to consider any level without that. And Mr. Parker, we did get a plan, but what I was referencing is that it consistently says approximately $10.6 million. Well, that's not a firm number for me, and there are some attachments that are missing, including an attachment A and some other components that give me concern. So it is not a complete development plan as far as I'm concerned to review for tonight. So I can't comply with the schedule that is requested of us to advertise for a public hearing on tomorrow as yet.
City Manager.
I think Mr. Parsons indicated the max amount is listed in there, and this TIF development plan does not indicate any participation. It's not a legally binding document to participate the city, county, or any other. This is a statutory requirement proving that a TIF is allowed by statute. The schedule that you see attached is a proposed TIF schedule. We did not put this on here tonight for y'all to vote on the development plan or the proposed schedule. This is a discussion, so I can update you on the conversations I've had when you weren't around. So today, I think, is when we decide how you all want to move forward, what is the schedule you all want to do, and how you would like this TIF development plan presented back to you. I think Mr. Parsons would indicate the nature of the development plan is a statutory requirement, and many communities pass it as such. The guts of this whole thing is in the development agreement, which ties us and the developer and the state to it. It is your all's purview. You can scratch through that proposed TIF schedule, tell us how you want to do it. You can look at this development plan and give us comments, but we can't kick the can too far down the road to plan and study. The developer who bought this piece of property is put on a 2-year time frame to build a parking garage, or it reverts back to the state. We have some timing here. I think it would be great that we move forward with due diligence. And I can't imagine coming out of this pandemic revenue crisis, supporting our local businesses and hotels with construction workers working on this project, working on a Tiger grant and a few other large projects downtown. I think it would prop up our existing small businesses and hotels. I agree with you all. We need to do our due diligence, and we don't need to subsidize the state's requirement to build a garage for the hotel. I think those are valid points, but this is being presented as an informational process to get your all's feedback today. Let's figure out how to move forward.
Any other members? Commissioner Sauer.
Commissioner Wisman, maybe you can give us some middle ground to aim for.
Yeah, my recommendation, it seems to me that we've been delayed a little bit, that this should have been brought back to us in March. The developers were originally planning on breaking ground in April. Of course, the COVID virus has delayed everything for everyone. But I would suggest that we have an opportunity to take the development plan, which is essentially a document that states we're willing to participate on, an enabling document, right? This is not, it's called a development plan, but in truth, what most of us are familiar with, of course, will be construction documents, and it's a wholly separate thing, even though the terms sound similar. So what I would suggest is that we have a chance to review this fully, ask questions of Mr. Parsons and our staff to fully vet ourselves, since we just received this Friday, and come back at our work session in July to define the schedule moving forward. And I would like a little bit more time and for all of us to have some conversations with the developer, revisit their actual plans and how that may impact our public infrastructure. The boundaries defined as is include a lot of public infrastructure that has been repaired in recent years. Let's say Wilkinson Boulevard was just resurfaced with concrete just a few years ago. So I'd like to know the impacts of our public infrastructure components before we agree to this. And I think we can do that within a fairly quick time frame. And I know we need to move on forward quickly for the developers' requirements. So I think we can do that by next month, and then we can have hopefully a public hearing maybe by the end of July.
City Manager.
I would,
City Manager.
yes.
May Can you bring us some sort of proposed framework or timetable for the work session in July?
Sure. I think with the document you all have in hand, I'll check on the missing attachment. But I think you all should review what you have now. The Commonwealth Economics Report is Exhibit A. That was a big, long document. I think that was given to you all during the TIF presentation when the developer was present. We'll provide that again in electronic format. But I would look at this TIF development plan we provided tonight and try to get us comments in the next week or two so we can get Mr. Parsons to look at them, answer questions. Maybe there are some additions, but just remember, this document is essentially a formality, but I think all the due diligence needs to be spent on the development agreement with the developer and conversations with the state on their participation. And this transit grant is a big deal. Maybe we'll know more about it at the end of summer. But I would start sending in comments on this document if you have concerns or comments on the proposed schedule we provided you all, and we can adjust it accordingly.
Keith, this is Patricia. So my question for the that you guys have, I know it's just a hypothetical, that it's just a proposed schedule for 7/15, which is mid-July, to hold a public hearing with maybe possibly the city and the county joint. What does that look like, and how are we truly going to get any public information on this? Because so far as I'm concerned, this city commission has done quite a bit that the community nor the residents have had a lot to say on the last couple of months, and people are trying to push things through. So I also would like to know how are they going to be able to speak? How are we going to be able to get their information that they want to give, or ideas or issues to be heard when we're, I think July 1, I think it's 50 or less people. What does that look like? And have we thought about that? Or are we just putting it on paper to save face? Because I truly want the community to have a voice and know what's going on.
Commissioner Baldrige, I fully agree with you. We've got to make sure, as I said a while ago, that we involve the community in this process. This is one of the largest, most transformational projects in our community's history, and at least in 2 generations, that we cannot forego the usual public input process because of a rare circumstance that we're unable to have the usual input. We've got to be creative about how we involve the community, who right now don't understand what we're doing and the scope of this entire project.
Now, I would agree. I have talked to Tommy Russell about a public meeting, what it would look like. Again, the schedule you have in front of you is a proposed schedule. You could add 2 weeks to every date on there and move it however you want. The public meeting, if it were to happen in July, would look probably something similar to what the county had. If you don't want to forego the old way we did public meetings, we're probably looking at having this public meeting next year about this time. It's going to be a special process. It is going to be a process we'll have to handle to make sure everybody has their say. You know, if we can have 50, I don't know if we still want 50 in the middle of July, the way things are going right now. I think we have a network to bring people in or to do online input. If we don't find some way to do it that way, it's not going to happen for another year, because it's going to be some kind of special public hearing, but it can be any date you all want. I just know there's a clock ticking, and not to rush anybody, but I think if we move forward, ask our questions, do our due diligence, everything will stay on track. Maybe these dates move a few weeks. These were aggressive dates. All we did was ask, somebody put a calendar together that utilized our scheduled meetings for July and August for both the city and the county. We can put together another one that utilizes our August, September meeting for the city and the county. Girls' purview. We just need to kind of have an end to the process. We can't just say, well, we'll discuss it again at the work session. I think we need to start sending comments in if you have questions about this development plan. And if we do anything by the work session, we say, yeah, this is the development plan we want. Let's file it in the city clerk and schedule our public hearing.
Mr. Parker, the clock has been ticking on this project for quite some time, and I feel like we've not been given any regular updates, but to just receive this Friday and say, I'm fine, let's move forward is unacceptable. I combat some of your suggestions that yes, there will be some special circumstances here, but we need to try our best to combat the unusual situation we're in to allow public input. And maybe that is 15 public meetings of 20 people or less all across the community. Whatever we need to do to ensure that the community is involved and informed in this project is imperative. And I think we can do it in a timely manner that will not further delay the project, given the delays we've already experienced. But as we've said, I think the presentation tonight has been good. Now we have 2 weeks to discuss, all of us, the process that we want and the timeframes, and we validate those at our next meeting.
Mayor,
So,
I can't read your lips, Mayor.
Unmute, Mayor.
he is on mute. He's having audio issues.
Okay.
Okay, so Keith, with this, I know you're saying, this is a proposed schedule is what I'm holding. This is what I had at the end of the week for everyone to go over. So what are you asking? You want us to go ahead and push this back? I know Eric's saying, wait to our next meeting. Is that suitable to wait for our next work session, or are you wanting us to go ahead and push it back with an additional 2 weeks per each? What are you thinking?
I think that the development agreement needs the most public input. That's where we're committing future tax revenues. I think the formality of this TIF development plan is being overlooked. And the way it's worded, we're used to development plans stating this is what a development's going to be. I think we need to educate. I think we could put this draft development plan on the internet for the public to look at. But I want to hear the public's input when we start talking about how many percentage of future tax revenues that we're going to commit in this development agreement. This development plan does not commit anything. It just shows it by statute, we're required to do this TIF development plan and put everybody on notice. The guts is in the development agreement. That's what I want to hear from the public the most.
The public needs to be involved in the entire process from the get-go, or they feel left out. I'm not
my computer is having trouble with it. It's on. It's saying
now
it's working, but for some reason y'all can't hear. So the judge's trying to fix it. So I apologize. It's not my laptop. It's one that we had down here. So they're trying to figure it out. Do what?
You're cursed.
I know, it must be.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Parsons? How do the TIF development plans, what normally happens in other communities on that part?
I know that there's a concern about public involvement, but for the most part, almost all the TIF development hearings we've ever had, no one shows up on those. I don't mean to downplay the importance of public involvement at all, but that's just the fact, because oftentimes in the way it's just a statutory requirement that says the area meets the requirement. Sometimes the development plans are written with a specific tax recommendation in them. This one was specifically not. I amended the document so that there's no specific commitment, just so that we can move forward if you choose to do so. But we can do however you want to do it. The meats of the TIF development plan is a simply a document that describes the area and describes why it meets the terms of the statute for being there. And also it anticipates some participation by the city and county. It doesn't give any indication. So that's really what the situation is. Most time, no one shows up. Now in this one, I know there's been a lot of public comment already. I've seen some things going back and forth. So there may be more comment at that level, but traditionally, there's been no one attending these public hearings.
Mr. Parsons, if I may, we're in special circumstance, right? Tradition, every community and every project I understand is very different. I've reviewed many of the TIF projects across the state, many that you've been associated with in this process. We are in a rare circumstance where we have businesses and people that are struggling and in an uncertain future. And I think it's imperative upon us to have a very open process that explains fully what we're doing to the community, so that even Mrs. Waldrich continually suggests that this commission is somehow taking liberties due to the nature of things at the moment. And I want to make sure that those are combated. We seem to have a preference that we're always told that the sky's falling, this is imperative, we have to make a decision now. And I never think that a hurried approach begets the best results. I intend that we're going to have a public process that fully vets and informs the community as needed. Because of the special circumstance that we're in, we're going to take extra steps that we normally wouldn't take because of the importance of this project to the community. I've talked with the developers, and they're going to have a fantastic project for us, and it's imperative on us to move forward, but we've got to involve the community in something that transforms nearly a quarter of our downtown that currently is a lot of misinformation out there. And whether this is just a formality part of the process or not, it is something we're going to bring to the public. So to fast track it is not going to work. And again, we just received this Friday. As always, we have 2 days to review and then hold our meeting, and that's not enough time to decide how to go forward. I think we now work, all of us, with our city manager to define exactly the schedule to approve and the format that we want to engage the public in this process. And I'm sure we all have many ideas about how we can do that. Varied in-person meetings, limited internet sessions, whatever it may be. So
I've got it.
Pro Tem. Mayor,
I've
you're
got it.
good.
Mayor's on, Tommy.
I've got it. I'm here.
Mayor,
Mr. Sauer.
you know, I think we're beating a dead horse. I
Yeah, we
think
are.
we could do the development plan the very next meeting. Commissioner Wisman has valid questions that he wants to ask, and I think he can do that between now and the next meeting. So why can't we go forward? I see Commissioner Tippett has his hand up.
I got a little finger here. I'd like to make a motion and get us off the dime, guys. I move that this board get its comments and observations back to staff in a week and have staff have a TIF development plan ready for approval at the work session in July. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't shift gears there, but we got to get off the dime tonight.
I'll second the motion.
Motion by Commissioner Tippett, second by Commissioner Wisman. Everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. All right, any discussion? All right, seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, I think she said my name, yes.
Tremaine, you're muted, I believe.
No, she's not muted, her volume's just not working. Maybe on her thing.
Commissioner Waldridge?
There you go, it's just echoing.
Yes.
Wisman, your call.
Yes.
Mr. Tippett?
Yes.
Mr. Wisman?
And
Mr. Sauer?
I vote yes, too. I heard
Mayor
all
May.
five. All five vote yes. I'm gonna go back to, you ready for me to go back to it?
I'm going to switch back to Model Review.
Thank you for coming and making the presentation, Mr. Parsons, and helping us navigate this process. It's a sticky one for sure, and obviously one that is incredibly important, and we can't relate how important the impact of this it will be to our community, and just one that we've got to navigate very carefully and make sure that the public's involved. So thank you.
Thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to be involved.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May, is your mic working now? Shemay,
Can
we
you
can't
guys
hear.
hear me?
It's a pretty big delay. You
I'm
may
about
want
to
to click
make a
out.
motion that we buy Macs for everyone.
May, you-
Mayor, can you unmute your computer where you're at, please?
Shemay, you may want to get out and get right back in. There's a connection issue.
My audio turned on and my computer's all the way up.
Your audio is just slightly delayed, Tremaine, for some reason, about 10 seconds.
Mayor, are you
Yeah.
there?
I'm here. Can you all hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Tremaine, you
Yeah.
might turn your
I switched
webcam back on the
I
other.
picked out another computer. I think they got it. They just switched me to another computer here. Are we waiting for the city clerk?
She was going out and coming back in because of a delay, yes.
All right, so staff has switched me to another computer.
So
There's a bell.
we were on action items number 2 before we let Mr. Jim Parsons start.
All right, so is there everybody there? I don't see Sherman yet. I don't see the city clerk. There she is.
There she is.
City clerk, can you hear us? You're really soft. Your volume is low. Next item, then we'll go ahead and do second reading on item number 2 and ask the solicitor to read it by title and summary only, please.
An ordinance appropriating the revenue to be received by the city of Frankfort for fiscal year 2020 to 2021. This ordinance appropriates revenue to be received by the city of Frankfort for fiscal year 2020 through 21 in accordance with the budget submitted and hereby approved.
All right,
Move to approve, Mayor.
Commissioner
Second.
Tippett, motion by Commissioner Tippett, second by Commissioner Walters. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
We can't hear you again. Tremaine.
Yes.
Tippett,
I vote yes.
Wisman,
Can Tremaine hear us or not? Can you confirm you can hear us, Tremaine? Okay. I'm going to vote no. I think this is a hurried. We received this about 10 days ago, barely enough time to get it through before the deadline, and I think we've got a lot of work to do. I know we're going to come back in July, but I think it was
Mr. Tippett?
unfortunate that we have to come back in next month and review something we should have had time to do already. So I vote no.
I'd like to make a statement to that if I can, Mayor. Is this appropriate?
We're in the
time?
middle of a vote, Mayor. I think that's
No,
inappropriate.
we're in a roll call.
I think, Tremaine, you call my name. I
There's a
vote,
delay.
I vote yes, Tremaine.
She did. Commissioner Sauer is indicating he voting yes.
Mr. Sauer?
yes. Yes.
Mayor May?
Yes.
just to clarify too, we'll go back and revisit some of the sections of the budget that we are going to make some changes to. So in particular, the part about employee raises, that's going to be relooked at. So our employees and staff should just understand that's just a placeholder that we put in there. We will come back and review that accordingly. So please don't take this as the final budget.
Absolutely.
And
Right.
City Manager.
May, if you didn't have trouble, I think Bobby is going to send you a phone number so you could call in, so we could keep going. And I'd like to remind everybody that we started sending out draft numbers in May, long before 10 days ago. And if you haven't had time to review it, that's fine. We can fix it later, but it's not a correct statement to say you only got it 10 days ago. Thank you.
Mayor, I resent that. We got the final draft budget, all proposal, about 10 days ago. In fact, at our last, the day before our last meeting. So that's my statement.
All right, next item, Second Street, number 3, Second Street Tiger Project. Read this by title and summary only, please.
Actually, Mayor, I think the one you're looking at is a contract addendum rather than an ordinance.
Oh, okay. Let's,
Yes.
So this is we need approval on addendum number 2 with KYTC and a resolution. Are there any questions?
Yeah, do we have Chuck with us that can give us just a brief overview of this addendum, the impacts of it?
I saw him on this small,
Sure.
I'm on a small computer and I can't see who's on here. So
Yeah.
I think we do. Chuck Knowles.
I am online. Can you all hear me?
Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, this particular amendment was initiated back in December. We recognized possibly the need for additional right-of-way money for this project. We were in the early stages of identifying easements and parcels of property that may need to be purchased. So we asked Federal Highways and KYTC to bump up the right-of-way allotment for this work. And we are just now getting around, unfortunately, to getting this amendment approved. But I think that what you're looking at is a request to increase the right-of-way funding, $200,000. That money came out of the Tiger Grant money, came out of the construction phase. But we're at a point now that I can tell you we're not going to need that $200,000. So the next amendment opportunity we have, we're going to take that $200,000 and put it back into the construction phase and move ahead. And so that's kind of the background behind this. It's taken 6 months to get to this point on this doc.
So, Mr. Chuck, are you saying we're being asked to approve an amendment that we no longer need?
Yes, but Federal Highways has already approved. They approved it in March, and the cabinet just recently sent us their version with the city to sign on. So it's been very slow, Commissioner Wissman. What I'm saying now is we won't need that $200,000, but we'll take care of that formally in the next amendment for construction.
The formality that we just need in the process. I move to approve.
Commissioner Wissman, did you say you made a motion to approve?
Yes.
Second.
Okay. Motion by, second by Commissioner Sells. Any discussion? I don't think we have any. All right.
Thank you,
Clerk, please
Chuck.
call roll.
Yes.
Commissioner Waldridge,
Delayed.
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Tippett?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson? Mayor? Mayor?
Got us.
Okay. And I vote yes. All right, next item would be
discussion, if needed, on item number 4 concerning Capitol View Park High School Soccer Fields Lighting Project, upgrades at Capitol View Park, including but not limited to lighting, sewer upgrades, upgrades to fields, concession buildings, and restroom facilities.
Can I have a little bit more? What is, I don't know, is Sean on?
Yeah, there is, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Please.
There is a formal contract that we just got back final edits from Musco for the lighting project. Those were emailed to you late today. That is something that needs to be approved. We want to move forward tonight, but you just got it by email. I'm not sure if there's something else we need to talk about or not.
Any other commissioners have any other questions or comments on Commissioner Tibbet?
I'm gonna say, let's go ahead and make the motion to approve the lighting contract with the Musgrove Company. Keith?
Yes.
So moved.
All right.
And Laura has some.
Second, is there a second?
I would like, before a second, I'd like to hear what Laura has to say.
I'm going to roll call right now. I mean, I don't motion. Is there a second, or do you want to, and then we can call in the solicitor? All right, second by Commissioner Sauer. All right, city solicitor.
It's really a small comment, just to say that with this contract, we've been hurrying as quickly as we can to get it in front of you guys. But that means Musco and myself and Sean and Keith have been going back and forth a little bit. So there may be a few technical amendments that are different from what you see in the email, but they should not affect price or the substance of the agreement. So the authorization for the mayor to sign would include, just so that you all know, any little technical amendments we might make. If there's anything substantive, we would bring it back to you all.
Mayor?
Commissioner Tibbet.
I want to thank staff, okay? I know they've been, I want to say this appropriately, without too much of a colloquialism, they've been busting their hindquarters on this, and I appreciate their effort. Thank you, Ms. Ross. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. We've asked you to expedite this, and you've performed admirably, so thank you.
Thank you.
What is, I'm sorry, I'm looking at this. I didn't see this come through our email before the meeting. What is the purchase price? I'm not seeing that value here, but this is a state contractor. Can one of you go into this a little bit more?
Don, are you on?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the price of the entire project for the Musco lighting system is $345,000. Okay. So that replaces all new lighting on 1 and 2. You also have the option to look at $10,000 additional adder. And what that does, there's 2 adders. One is color and one is non-color. They're basically, you can add a light show to the lights, and each one of those is $10,000. That's where you'll see $10,000 adder number 1, $10,000 adder number 2. The base model and those adders it makes sense.
Hold on, Sean. Will you hold on a second?
Bobby, can you mute caller 1, please?
There we go. Sorry,
Yeah.
Sean, we had some interference.
Thank you.
That's okay. Does that make sense? Did you hear about the adders that are on there?
Yes.
Okay, those are totally optional. We don't
Sean,
have
in your
to.
opinion, are those necessary whatsoever then? I don't see a light show necessary on playing fields.
No, I mean, they're not necessary. They're just something cool. It's a talking point. You know, people come from out of town. They're like, wow, did you see those lights? That was really awesome. But other than that, it's not entirely necessary. It was just,
Mayor.
that's a typical adder. A lot of communities like to add those, so they just added them, but they're totally optional.
I have a question for Mr. Pickens.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So when we get back to normal, if we ever do, Sean, we could have some sort of outside show other than a sporting event, right?
Yes, sir.
So, and if we have some entertainment event, it probably would not damage the turf, right?
You are correct. Yes.
So if we want to have something, this board should decide if it wants to have something really cool, right? If we can justify the extra expense, that's the real question, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other? Commissioner Witzman?
I think this is actually good timing in conjunction with our park plan that are prioritizing the Sauer 1 and 2 fields. I think we were getting a little pushback that we were maybe getting the cart ahead of the horse on getting these lights, but I think this will enable us to fast forward the project at Capitol View. So I don't see the need for the color adder lights or transition shows, though. I think we need to be very strategic in every penny we spend, and we've got some other needs that could go a long ways towards. That's a new roof on one of our park shelters. That are also in budget or something right now. So, and we do have a new stage on its way, right? That will have its own lighting show that we can use to that effect.
That we spend too much on.
Well, one thing to add on Sauer 1, which is the main field, the bigger of the two fields, included in the base price, there's already a light show package. It's not color, it's just on or off, and it does a light show on Sauer 1. That's already included in the base price.
Sean, these are all LED, correct? So they're technically about right. They're color changing ability and visual effects as well. Generally,
yeah, they're all LED, but they won't be able to change colors. They'll just be able to turn on and off.
Sean, I have a question. So
yes,
with these lights and the way that these lights are going, can you hear me?
Yeah,
I can hear you.
With these lights and with the way that these lights will be set up and installed, things of that nature, we have been looking to get this contract signed with the state and seeing, the possibilities of getting some of those fields turfed and things. With spending this money on these and having them installed, will these lights be in the same situation, the same area they would need if we were to turf some of the 1 and 2?
Yes, they'd be in the same location, yes.
So we would be able to turf around them, and they would be able to turf the field without damaging those lights and us going back to redo them.
That is correct. The lights need to go in before turf would ever need to go in.
Right. Okay. So with that being said, I would like to make the motion, though we are in a time of trying to save pennies. It seems that, we spend money here and there, we throw money here and there. This is $10,000. I think it would really, if we're going to do it, we might as well do it right. If that's something that we can add to bring in people and that adds more excitement and brings in more money, I say that we could do it as long as we can find it somewhere in our budget. I know we're pinching pennies right now, but we're throwing money here, there, and everywhere else right before COVID. I just think that if it's there, it's $10,000. And I'd be willing to bet that our community for that would even want to raise that on their own or do a GoFundMe to upgrade them while we're at it. I'd be willing to bet, but that's just my opinion. But I would like to do that. If Keith, I don't know if you're Keith, if you can add in just a little bit of, I don't know, on the budget. What do you think? This $10,000, and then also Sean, what do you think on that side of it from Parks perspective on what that would look like if you guys could share?
I just want to clarify, Commissioner Walters, did you want to make a motion, or are you saying you are going to make a motion?
Sorry, I'm muted. No, I would like to make a motion after I hear from Keith.
All right, so right now you don't have a motion. We'll come back to you.
Correct.
City
Mayor, isn't there a motion on the floor?
I was not making a motion, Commissioner Tippett. I said that I would like to make a motion. I just wanted to hear from Keith before I made it official.
I mean, my question was, didn't we have a motion on the floor, and we're now in discussion.
City Clerk,
I thought
Yes,
I made a motion. I thought I made the motion to approve the Musgrove contract.
and Sauer seconded it. We're in discussion.
But Commissioner Waldridge could make an addendum to that.
Yes, I
amendment.
can make it afterwards, but
Yes.
I didn't want you to think I was making that whole. I did not.
That's
I
fine.
knew that yours. Yes, I
Whatever
wanted to
works.
be afterwards.
Whatever works, Commissioner.
Exactly. I just wanted to hear from Keith.
all right, City Manager.
I think when we did the budget amendment, we put enough money that would cover this. It sounds like we have the light show one color capability on Sauer 1. It sounds like for 10,000, you could get the light one color on Sauer 2. You could add color for $10,000. So there's a few options. And again, we didn't ask these options. It's kind of an upsell by Musco. They came back with their quote and said you could add this and this. If you want to add color to one of the fields, I would bet we could add this later if we wanted, or y'all could do it now. It's totally up to you all. I think the budget amendment had enough money.
Well, that's what I was going to say. What was our budget amendment? Was that 480? What was it for something?
I think it's 400.
400,000. So technically it would still fall well under what we actually budgeted for it anyway. So are we going to go ahead and with the motion that's on, are we going to go ahead and move, or do we add that addendum on now?
Well, we can add it on now. We can add it on later.
Mayor, may I make a recommendation? Ms. Waldridge does have a good idea, I suppose. Let's maybe reach out to the community. Let's ask Sean and city manager to contact the provider to see if this is an additional add-on. If there's a lot of interest in the soccer community and those that are using the fields, maybe it's something we need to consider. I see where it could be a nice benefit, but at the same time, I'm also thinking, we've got leaking roofs on a couple of buildings in the Parks Department that each are $10,000 to $20,000, and a lot of really bigger needs, if you will, that are pertinent as well at the moment, that we are going to start, unfortunately, probably have to start making some very serious cuts in the near future.
Mayor, may I?
Commissioner Waldridge.
I'd like to just go ahead and make the motion that you add the color lights to the fields, and just move forward with that in one move. Go ahead and do it. Get it done. Let's move forward with it. I mean, goodness gracious, we went from $100,000 stage to what, $160,000 stage. I think we can add a few $1,000s onto some lights for a spectacular thing for our athletes and our kids in the community. So there's my motion.
Okay, that's a motion to amend the original motion.
Correct.
It does require a second.
Second.
Thank you.
Second by Commissioner Tippett. Is there any discussion on the amendment? All right, we'll vote on the amendment. I'm just going to do a quick voice vote. And if I think that if there's any no's, then I'll go back and redo it, but I don't think there will be. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, like sign? Okay, that was easy. Clearly the ayes have it. All right, so now we're ready for you ready for the main motion, or are there any other questions? This was
Call for the vote.
sorry?
Just say call the vote. Call for the vote.
So this would be the original motion as amended to include the additional provisions. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm also do a voice vote on this one too. All those in favor of item number 4 as amended, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, like sign.
Can we abstain?
Sure. You didn't. You do. Well, we're doing a voice vote. No. Let me
Call it.
let me say.
Call that light.
Let me say for the record then,
there was one member, Commissioner Sauer, would like to not be recorded as voting, so
Okay.
I guess,
How are you gonna stop voting now when you've been voting and pushing this the whole entire time? Okay, whatever.
so before we clear out, if,
Oh, Lord.
will you look at, just to double check me on that, so if Commissioner Sauer had concerns, we'll let you research that real quick. We'll keep moving with the meeting and then come back to that to make sure that if that's the case, that I can go back and actually do a roll call. But since we already voted, the only way to do that, I can do a procedural thing and get that back in front of us, or we can say, direct the city clerk to notate in the official minutes that Commissioner Sauer wanted to be recorded as not voting on that item, which is probably the cleanest way to do it.
I think that's the mayor, just from my perspective, I would say that's the cleanest.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to double check.
Sure.
All right.
Mayor, may I make a request that staff send us the full breakdown of the financial? I'm just not seeing it in the email that was sent to us today, and I'd like to have that just to review. There is an
item number 4.
Yes, that we just approved. There is a insurance certificate that has some financials, but I'm just not seeing the breakdown of the financials. There's equipment description, but not a cost analysis.
Okay, so staff directed to provide a cost breakdown.
The invoice, and make sure that is part of what you sign. I suppose I don't see it there.
Okay.
Commissioner Wiseman, I will email that out right now.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
All right. Next item, Frankfort Independent Schools amended interlocal agreement and resolution. This is going back to the 2019 interlocal agreement and an amendment to the interlocal agreement and resolution suggested. And if there's any questions, we'll answer those. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve, Mayor.
Moved by Commissioner Tippett. Second by Commissioner Sauer. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll do this by voice vote too to help the clerk out. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. All right, clearly the ayes have it. Thank you. Next item would be taking number 8 from consent orders on the pump station that has been moved from consent to action items. Commissioner Sauer.
Kenny, are you available?
Yes, I'm here.
Kenny, would it cause you any damage if we held this to the next meeting? I've got some questions that, we've gone back and forth, and they weren't completely answered. We could have it the first meeting in July.
It only hold us up a little bit. Really and truthfully, this project has been a disaster from the beginning, and we're trying to finish it up.
Well, I move that we, if it's insignificant or if it's a little bit, I move that we hold it to the next meeting.
Can we just pass over it, Mayor?
I'll second that, John.
Yeah, if you want to make a motion to pass over and let it return to place. Okay. Motion by Commissioner Sauer, second by Commissioner Waldridge.
No, Eric Wiseman.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Wiseman, second. Get that right?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I've got a different computer now and everybody's in different places and it's a lot smaller. All right. All those in favor of passing over this item signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, like sign. All right, ayes have it. So it'll be, we'll make that whatever item it'll be under action items for next month.
Yeah, Mayor, I just have a few issues that I've tried to clean them up with Kenny, and I think we will.
Okay.
I don't think there'll be a problem next time.
All right, and if there's no issues, we could put that back in the consent. We could make that item number 1 under consent if that gets worked out.
Okay.
Is that good for everybody? Okay.
Next item would be an executive session per KRS 61-810 sub 1 sub B, deliberations on future acquisition of real property related to downtown development, road realignment, and blight elimination, where publicity would likely affect the value of the property. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Woodruff, second by Commissioner Waldridge. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. All right, clearly the ayes have it. Right, we are in executive session.